Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, Sow, Grow, Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of Sow, Grow, Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast, which is dedicated to nonprofit leaders who are passionate about making a difference. I'm your host, Haley Cooper, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on a journey of growth, inspiration, and transformation. At Lead with Heart, we believe that leading with heart means embracing empathy, compassion, and authenticity in every aspect of our work. It's about putting people first, fostering genuine connections, and creating a positive impact that goes beyond numbers and metrics. In the nonprofit world, it can often feel like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. The challenges are immense and the road can be lonely. But here, you're not alone. This podcast is a community where we support each other, share our stories, and learn together. Each episode will dive into personal and professional development topics tailored specifically for nonprofit leaders. From innovative fundraising strategies and effective team management to self-care practices and leadership insights, we're here to provide you with practical strategies that you can apply to your life and work. My goal is to empower you, elevate your leadership, and engage your heart in all that you do. I want to help you navigate the unique challenges of the nonprofit sector with confidence and resilience, so you can continue to create meaningful change in the world. So whether you're driving to a meeting, taking a break, or winding down for the day, tune in and join us on this journey. Together we'll discover what it truly means to lead with heart. Thank you for being here. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. I am very excited for today's guest. I feel like I say that all the time, but today's guest is someone who brings both heart and data to the world of fundraising. Jacqueline Ackerman is the interim director of the Women's Philanthropy Institute, where she helps nonprofit professionals build more inclusive, meaningful donor relationships by unlocking the power of women's giving. With a deep understanding of the research and real-world application, Jacqueline champions empathy, storytelling, and authentic connection as tools to deepen engagement and drive generosity. So whether you're a seasoned fundraiser or just starting out, today's conversation will leave you inspired to think more intentionally about how we connect with donors, especially women who are reshaping the philanthropic landscape. Well, welcome to the podcast, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
So let's start with a little bit of heart, obviously, lead with heart, and your story. Like, how did you get into the world of philanthropy and then specifically focusing on women's philanthropy?
Thanks for that question. I feel like some people know my background and some people really just know me from my work with the Women's Philanthropy Institute. So I actually grew up in Haiti. My parents were aid workers. My dad ran medical clinics out in the country. And I lived in Haiti mostly from the age of 3 months old until I went to undergrad. And so that didn't lead, in a straight line to WPI, but it certainly put me in this culture and allowed me to see a lot and experience a lot. Haiti has per capita really the highest number of expats, nonprofit workers, missionaries, et cetera, of anywhere in the world. And so I saw some good examples and a whole lot of really not great examples of how to do the work, especially cross-culturally. So that really stuck with me. And I was able to, I went to undergrad, I went to grad school for nonprofit management at Indiana University in Bloomington. And then shortly after that, A professor of mine introduced me to the director of research at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. So I've stayed at IU now since 2010, including grad school, but it's been a great journey. I always wanted to do something in nonprofits and philanthropy, and my grad school background gave me the tools that I needed to do research on philanthropy. It's a little farther removed. It's not frontline service or anything like that. But what I like about doing the research is that it enables all of those frontline folks, whether they're actually service providers or fundraisers, et cetera, to do their jobs better. And so my work started out with looking at high dollar philanthropy, why someone might give those gifts, where they're going, how to attract those. And then I started doing more and more work with gender and looking at women donors, their motivations for giving, their patterns of giving, the differences that we see often between men and women donors. And so that just drew me. And I have been working for the Women's Philanthropy Institute most of my time at the Lilly Family School. So I would say about 10 years. And I'm interim director now, but I've done most of the legwork on most of our research for the last decade, and have been really privileged to be involved in kind of every aspect of our work for a while now.
Yeah, I love that. And like I was saying off recording, that I have been following the Women's Institute for a while. So this is like such a pinch me moment. And I've just kept up with the data. And I really appreciate the way that you and your team go about collecting that data. So can you tell us a little bit behind the scenes of how you go about collecting that data, what you are looking for, who's involved in collecting that data and doing that research? And then the last question would be, what are some of the key findings over the years?
I would say it really depends. As a researcher, you might get that answer from me a lot. It really depends on the exact study that you're looking at. So we do have some studies that are what we call qualitative. So they're essentially, for kind of a listener who's not familiar with research terminology, they're story-based, essentially. We're talking to individuals, usually a dozen, 24, maybe 36 people, and asking them in depth about their story, why they're giving, et cetera. And that is a really useful way of gathering data for things that we don't really know much about. And so when we were first starting 10 years ago to look at giving to women's and girls' causes, there was really nothing out there. And so our first step was to ask a few dozen people about their giving, why they do it. If they don't do it, why not? What would influence them to do it? And that allows us to move more deeply into the space to even know what questions we would ask on a large scale survey. That is something that we do. I love doing it because I think that these stories and the personal touch, that asking individuals and small groups of people these questions is so valuable, especially to fundraisers and nonprofit leaders who want those stories of individual gifts and to put a face to things. The biggest part of our research is based on large scale, what we call quantitative data. So it's surveys that ask a lot of yes, no, dollar amount questions. And so some of that we are able to partner with the larger Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. They have a ton of data they invest in, and that a lot of our donors will invest in, that gives us national data sets so that we can tell, for example, how much the average American household is giving or where those gifts are going, et cetera. And that data flows into all sorts of research projects, but we're able to use it because it has gender data. Sometimes that data that's already being collected isn't speaking directly to the questions that we have. And so we might add a question from year to year, or we might do our own survey from year to year. And so we've done that, for example, when we want to understand how households make decisions about charitable giving. So how families, partners, spouses might influence your giving, or how you might be discussing that together. That's not something that is regularly in a national data set. So we went out and did our own with that. So it really is all sorts of things. It just depends on what questions we want to ask And if we want a dollar amount, how much you are giving, are you a woman or a man? That is something that we can have in a national data set and just pull from really easily versus a subject matter that hasn't been very well explored by other researchers yet. And we really just want to do the startup process of doing this research.
Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs. Helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. Yeah, thank you so much for walking us through how you so thoughtfully go through that. And the data tells us that women give differently than men. Can you share some key findings from your research that nonprofit leaders should be paying attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. We have our basic findings that have been shown not just in one project or another, but in all of our research over 15 plus years. And so those data points are things like, yes, women are more likely than men to give to charity. Women are giving higher amounts than what we call similarly situated men. And so we don't compare, the average woman with the average man. We're comparing women and men in the same income bracket, same education, same age, et cetera, so that we know that men hold the bulk of wealth in our society. And so we're accounting for that. So accounting for that, women are more generous in these different ways. One thing that we also know is that women spread their giving out among different causes, different organizations. And we believe that's one reason why when you think of a philanthropist, at least until recently, people often thought of men, of kind of our biggest male donors, both presently and throughout history, because they are tending to invest all of their philanthropic funding in one organization or maybe a couple of organizations. Women are giving smaller amounts all over the place. And so even if their total giving might be the same, or they have the same capacity to give, they aren't receiving the same amount of recognition, and they're also not receiving the same amount of solicitations by major gift officers, for example, because they're not showing up on those wealth screenings as much. And then we know that women give in a different way. So women tend to give not just broadly to a lot of causes, but they tend to give holistically. So we see when men think about their charitable giving, they think about check writing to 501c3s. When women think about charitable giving, they are trying to use all of their resources to be generous. And so, yes, that's 501c3s. If they're interested in policy issues, it's 501c4s. It is beyond just money. It's volunteering their time. It's serving on a committee, volunteering their expertise. It's as little as sharing about an organization or a cause on social media, as big as the Melinda French Gateses of the world really talking about issues from a huge public platform. It's, I can donate this small amount, but I have a bunch of friends who care about this cause, and I'm going to bring them alongside me and build relationships between them and this cause or organization. So we find that women are expressing generosity in a much more expansive way compared to men. And that's not to say that men aren't generous. They certainly are, but they are generous in these really specific ways and for really specific reasons. And we just find that women are more attuned to the needs of the organizations, more focused on the end result, the end recipient, as opposed to this organization has a golf fundraiser, or this organization has so-and-so who's my CEO, and I really want to interact there, and I'm going to donate for that reason. I think that any philanthropic gift is great. It's going to serve a purpose, but we know that women's giving is done for different, broader, more connection-based reasons.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And When you're talking about this idea of women getting more involved, I saw something on LinkedIn the other day or a couple weeks ago saying affinity trumps capacity. And I think a lot of people talk about, they see the millions of dollars being poured into grassroots organizations and they're like, well, why can't we get that? And it's because, yes, that donor might have the capacity to give, but they don't have the affinity to your organization. So can you talk a little bit more about what the difference is and why it's important to have both?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that is a great shorthand. I haven't heard that one before, but it is so aligned with our work and what our research has found. Affinity trumps capacity. I'm going to take that one with me. Yeah, we know that, the world needs more philanthropy. There are so many serious problems facing our world, our society, our nation. And our belief is simply that to successfully work towards a better world, we need more philanthropy, and that needs to come from men and women. And so we are doing this research essentially to show donors how they can become more engaged in philanthropy. A lot of women donors don't necessarily grow up feeling like a philanthropist is something I can become. This is a word that describes me. I have financial philanthropic power and I am going to be a leader in this space. It's just not something that a lot of women are brought up to think or believe about themselves. And then we're also here to make sure that fundraisers know how to effectively engage women donors. So a lot of the kind of standard practices that fundraisers have been trained into or have been brought up in the field doing are based on this paradigm of not just male donor, but the white, wealthy male donor. And that's not to say that they are not wonderful givers and that their money does wonderful things for our organizations. They're very important. But when your whole system has been built on appealing to one specific type of donor, you're just leaving so many folks out. And so we seek to do this research so that fundraisers know how to really better engage everybody. Women donors are part of that, everybody. And so it's everything from, why are you approaching a woman with, we think about donor incentives, right? Well, donor incentives broadly are not necessarily a thing that women think about. If you approach them and say, you know what, with a gift this big, your name can go here, that is a turnoff. That is not even a neutral for them. And so it's a real challenge when fundraisers are just bringing their standard operating procedures to these conversations and not thinking about the specific motivations, the specific family situation, where the money came from, what this specific woman's desires or dreams are for the world, for her children, grandchildren, et cetera. And so that's really what we want to see happen with the research. And so I do find that our research broadly is showing that women are more relational and want to be more collaborative with their giving. And that can look like any number of things. So it can look kind of at the minimal level, like me sitting down at my kitchen table with my three best friends, and we talk about our philanthropy, where we want our charitable dollars to go. Is there anything that we want to do together? What have we learned about our different experiences? It can look like formally joining a giving circle, which is essentially where everyone puts a certain amount of money into the pot, and then you can grant out a larger amount, and that can be something that you vote on, something that, only leadership figures out for you, et cetera. But we know that women are the vast majority of giving circle members, and that many giving circles are really built for women. And this is a really unique way of women interacting in philanthropy. Someone I know who did a lot of this research on giving circles, we were talking one day and I remember saying, are there men only giving circles? And this was a long time ago before we'd really dug into the research. And he said, you know what? There are. And you know what the funny thing is? They act like your typical male donor and as a group. And so where you have women's giving circles that are creating committees, doing volunteer work around the calendar year, not just during this one period of time. You have galas and you have events where they're coming and voting. And then you have different meetups throughout the year. And then you've got men's giving circles and love them. They're showing up, they're writing their check, they're casting a vote, and then they'll see you next year. And so it was really fascinating to see that this collective giving experience is really much more embraced by women and women donors across the board. So you can think about collective giving and relational giving in these formal ways, but you can also think about it where, let's say a woman donor is not giving in collaboration with anyone. She still is looking for a relationship with that nonprofit. She still is more likely to give to a nonprofit if she's engaged with them in some other way, if she's attending their events, if she's invited to participate in a committee, in a focus group, and she is talking about her philanthropy with other people. Even if she's not giving with them, she's certainly talking about it, talking about the organizations, and trying to learn best practices from her peers. There's just such an element not only of giving together and collaborating, but of peer learning in the women's philanthropy experience.
This is so interesting to me. And what's funny is the other day I was doing prospect research for a client and I was literally just looking up women's giving circles, like in the particular area. I didn't even think about looking at men, but now I'm going to have to add that to my research. And I've been a part of a number of women's giving circles, like impact giving that does grant making, but they also have networking and volunteering, and they have that collective impact. And when we're talking about giving circles, and maybe someone is listening to this and they're like, what is that? And also, is the giving circle a part of the organization or is it separate? And I've seen nonprofits who have had it apart that the staff member gets too involved and then they're pulled away from their other duties. So what is the boundaries there, and how can a nonprofit like listening to this understand the purpose of a giving circle, how it integrates within the organization?
I love that question because I think sometimes when we talk about collective giving, we only think about giving circles and we only think about these kind of standalone organizations that bring in proposals or requests for funding from all sorts of organizations in their locale, in their geographic area, and then grant out to one or two. But really, collaborative giving is broader than that. And so, yes, you have giving circles, collective giving groups that are either separate 501c3s or a very specific group that's housed under a community foundation or something like that. So you have Impact 100 is a name that comes to mind that's in a lot of communities, but you have a ton of them all across the country. There's an organization called Philanthropy Together that is dedicated to growing the giving circle movement, and it hosts a database essentially of all giving circles across the country. So that's a great resource if you're interested in finding giving circles in your area, either to participate in or to seek funding from. One question I've gotten from a lot of fundraisers is, these giving circles, the proposals sometimes require a certain amount of work. And then let's say a giving circle receives like 100 or more requests for funding. They're only giving out 5-ish grants a year. And so I have found a lot of folks say giving circles get more attention, more credit than they deserve. And what I say to that is you're not only requesting funding from them for this one moment in time. You want this funding, the project that you're bringing to them is valuable, but you're also doing it to get in front of 100, 200, 500, usually women who, for the vast majority of giving circle members, that's not the only money that they're giving to charity. Maybe they're doing their $1,000 to participate in Impact 100 or whatever the group is called, but they're also giving money separately to the causes that they care about. We call this, when these donors get together, it's more about pooling their funds than about these people who would never give otherwise getting together and learning to give. It's about these people who are already generous getting together and giving in a very specific way. And so I think it's always valuable to get in front of those people and share your asks and share your mission. The other thing to note is that these women want to volunteer. They want to interact with organizations year round. And so even if you're not getting that top prize, if you're getting in front of them, you are essentially making an appeal to all of these potential donors at once and sharing your message with them. So that's just my little soapbox about why I do think that giving circles are so valuable beyond just the money that you're seeking out or that they're contributing. But the other thing that you mentioned is what kind of we in this space call affinity groups. So they are so for example, Indiana University does this. At the IU Foundation, we have a Women's Philanthropy Leadership Circle. That's a group of women. They give X amount to IU, but it's held in a certain account or pool of money, and then they vote on where to send those funds. It's all within the IU system, but there are so many different opportunities to support women's sports team, a women in STEM initiative at one of our schools, the Women's Philanthropy Institute. And so all of the giving stays within the IU system, but it's a way of further engaging these very specific women donors. And we also have, I believe, a Black giving affinity group, a Latino giving affinity group, an LGBTQ plus giving affinity group. And we're not alone. A lot of higher ed institutions do this, but also a lot of sizable nonprofits, because you're right, it takes people to run them. It takes people to do the administration. And so we find that they are very helpful for engaging folks in a deep way, in asking them to scale up their dollars to your organization, really commit to your organization, and to invest not just money, but time and energy getting involved. They are really effective, and they're also very high touch. And so there really isn't a good way of bringing an affinity group into your organization if you're not going to staff it. It does require some choices, and to bring on someone who, I would say, typically a major gift officer or a board liaison type person who knows how to interact with these folks, bring them together, host events where they can, again, have this community, because the community aspect is really key, especially for women donors. And so it does take an investment on the organizational side, and you can see results really quickly, but it does take an investment, not just of people power, but also a lot of the times women want connection. And so that often means events. That often means the work of hosting and bringing people together. And that can be a challenge, which is why we see a lot of these affinity groups at larger organizations. It can be a real challenge for smaller organizations to start them.
Hey there, podcast family. If you're like me and deeply committed to improving your leadership skills and fostering better connections with your team, I've got something truly amazing to share with you. I'm proud to introduce the EMC Masterclass, something I talk about often as a certified trainer. It's an incredible program developed by the renowned Dr. Lola Gershfeld, an organizational psychologist and corporate emotional connection expert. You might remember her from a podcast episode where she shared invaluable insights into the world of emotional connection. Dr. Gershfeld's EMC Leaders courses are designed for anyone working with people, whether you're a manager, supervisor, team leader, educator, coach, mentor, or a team member. This program is truly for everyone looking to enhance their communication and collaboration skills to raise more revenue for their mission. Now, let me tell you why the EMC Masterclass is a game changer. Dr. Gershfeld's groundbreaking emotional connection process has been integrated into top universities' curriculum and recognized by international organizations like ICF, HRCI, and SHRM. Humans are wired to seek emotional safety, and when we feel safe, we're more likely to take risks, share innovative ideas, and collaborate effectively. The EMC process is the catalyst for creating that emotional safety within your team. The virtual EMC Masterclass consists of 8 modules with 4 hours of expertly recorded material, 13 quizzes to reinforce your learning, and a workbook filled with activities for offline practice and something I still refer to daily. Ready to become an emotional connection master? Dr. Gershfield is offering an exclusive detail for our podcast listeners. Use the code LEADWITHHEART to enjoy a generous 10% discount on the EMC Masterclass. Head over to emcleaders.com and enroll in the EMC Masterclass today. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And thank you for breaking that down. And I think we're in a season or there's this transfer of wealth between generations. And so have there been any trends in the way you obviously said women want to be collaborative in their philanthropy? How have there been a change or trends in ways that fundraisers should engage that next generation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is not from the Women's Philanthropy Institute, but our colleagues at the Lilly Family School. We have a standalone research organization, and they produce things that I'm sure your listeners have heard of, like Giving USA or the Bank of America studies of affluent philanthropy, et cetera. The list goes on. And they have a recent study out that did look at Gen Z and millennial donors. I am super excited to dig into that by gender and see what we can find out, but we just haven't had the opportunity yet. The most interesting thing that I brought away from reading that report was the idea of causes versus organizations. And so we know that Gen Z and millennials are engaged in generosity, but they're engaged in different ways. And a lot of what we find about these younger donors is stuff that we've been saying about women donors for a long time. So we say women donors want to spread out their giving. They want to give more than just checks to 501c3s. They want to spend their money in ways that benefit people, the planet, et cetera. And so we find the same thing for Gen Z especially. And this concept of organizations versus causes, Gen Z is typically not saying, okay, this specific organization in my community, I am going to invest in them, or I'm donating here because I believe in the YMCA, the United Way. Pick your local organization and fill in the blank. They don't care about the organization name. They care about the organization's work. And so if they care, for example, about homelessness, about women's economic empowerment, about their local parks, et cetera, they are not saying, okay, which one organization can I invest in? They're saying, okay, what source can I shop at that give back part of their profits to these causes? What can I tell my financial advisor, if I have one, about how I want my 401k or other retirement, et cetera, invested? Am I investing only in environmentally and socially responsible funds? Because that is certainly a possibility in this day and age. That is something that a lot of younger donors do and a lot of women donors do. And so I think that it's a bit of a shock from an organizational standpoint when you have come up in the fundraising world saying, my organization has a great reputation. I know my organization is using money effectively. It's doing XYZ, really great things in the world, in our community. And then to have a younger person essentially say, yeah, and I'll give you a little bit, but I consider myself to be generous, and I'm doing that in these 10 different ways. It can be a bit of a shock, and it might seem like that person is not being generous because they're not funding what we think is like this best way of doing things. And really, I think the way forward is to embrace that generosity, to meet young people, meet women donors, meet all sorts of non-traditional donors or donors that haven't traditionally been paid attention to throughout history, where they are. Because if we continue to say, oh, young people aren't giving, oh, they're bad at giving, they don't understand XYZ, we're not building bridges with them. We're not meeting them where they are. And we need to recognize that they have some things to teach us about how to think about generosity and how to act generously that perhaps we can learn from, and what can we do in our organizations to better engage them, I think is a question that we should be asking. I hear a lot of like, oh, kids these days, and like, sure,
millennials.
Sure. Like, yeah, sometimes I also feel this way. Like, you're not alone. But I think we need to get out of that mindset and really say, look, this is the way that kids these days, quote unquote, are. And what are we doing to embrace that new mindset of generosity and bring them in and interact with them instead of just telling them they should be doing things differently?
That is such good advice. I love that. And as we wrap up, what do you have any lasting advice that you would give nonprofits that want to reimagine their fundraising strategies to be more responsive to women's values, voices, and vision?
Yeah, I think it's so easy to just do anything. I do get this question a lot when I'm speaking, and people will say, okay, well, it sounds like we're doing everything wrong and now we have to redo everything if we're going to really engage women. And it's like, no, that's not what we want. We want you to pick one thing and see what you can do. We know that a lot of these organizations are like one person development teams or even one person teams. And you don't have time to read research and think deeply about how to put it into practice. And so we just want you to take an hour, a half hour to do one thing differently. And that could be our research shows that women really need to be engaged in high-level conversations about philanthropy, even if a husband or a man in the household is the breadwinner or has made the decisions about philanthropy in the past. You've got to make connections with more than just that person in the household, whether it's a partner, a child, a grandchild. Once that one man is out of the picture, you have lost a potential relationship. And so engaging women in the family is so important. So whether it's, I'm a major gift officer, I'm going to go through my calendar for the next month and just make sure that I've extended an invitation to other people in this person's family. I'm going to evaluate whether I might be mistakenly or accidentally, or just because I'm doing business as usual, because there are only so many hours in the day, maybe I've left someone out of the conversation. It's as simple as that. For a prospect researcher, it's saying, am I researching prospects in such a way that only men are really rising to the top? What ways can I take a little extra time and bring more women into this list that I'm going to give other folks to take to the next level? I know that women are spreading their giving out. Is there a lower giving threshold that I want to look at for women who have given to our organization? Or do I want to look at the frequency of giving, whether they're giving every year or monthly, et cetera, as a qualifier instead of total gifts over time? And for even the database people, we find so many ways of coding your data and talking about it and saving information about your donors. Some databases are really great at saying, okay, if this came from a couple, they both get credit for the gift, or there's soft credit and hard credit, or we're going to record when a person has shown up in an event, or yes, it is the woman's name on all of the checks. And so our thank you notes are going to specifically go to her unless otherwise directed. Or this person really doesn't like being referred to as Mrs. his first name, his last name, and we're going to change that. Some organizations and some databases are better at that than others. And sometimes they're just easy fixes and easy settings changes, or talking to the developers about how to change that. So would I love to see every single nonprofit just pause and revamp everything to better engage women donors? Sure, but that's simply not feasible for really any nonprofit. And so we're just asking them to do one next thing to better engage women donors. And then we're optimistic that doing that one next thing will lead to great outcomes for your organization. And if that's the push you need to then do the next thing and the next thing, or to convince your leadership that it is a good idea to bring on someone specifically to work with women donors, or to start a women's affinity giving circle, then that's the data that you have to show them that this is worth investing in.
Yeah, I feel like we could have a whole nother podcast episode on the ways that you should address your donors. I see this question pop up all the time. It's, do you add doctor? Do you add Mrs. and Mr.? Like, how do you address your donors? And I think it's how you address people matters, especially with women. and putting them on the thank you letter if they're the ones driving behind the philanthropy. So I feel like that's going to be a whole nother podcast episode.
That's its own thing. Yeah. And what I will say is we do get that question a lot. Like, how do I know? And what I like to say is this is a connection opportunity. This is a stewardship opportunity where you're not calling them up and saying, would you consider giving to this? You're just calling up and saying, hey, I am new on the team, or I am going through my list and want to make sure I touch base with you. Thank you so much for your generosity. You know what? Here is what we've been doing with our envelopes. Is that really how you want to be referred to? Is there anyone else in your household that you want to have in these conversations about your giving moving forward? Just having those conversations is such a valuable touch point that it's just an opportunity, I think. And I think that donors are really receptive to, oh, they want to call me what I want to be called. They want to have conversations in a specific way with me. I think that can really only help your relationship with that donor.
And it comes down to the personalization, right? Like people, like I see emails from people that I know is going out to the mass, but it's like, hi, Haley. And then I'm like, oh, you are writing to me. Or I feel that even if it is like an automated message, I still feel that connection. I'm important because you remembered my first name, right?
Actually,
just simple things like that. Well, if people want to find you and the work that you're doing, where can they find you?
I'll definitely send a few links for your show notes, but they can find us at philanthropy.iu.indianapolis.edu/WPI. It is annoyingly long, but you can also just Google Women's Philanthropy Institute. We are in Facebook, Instagram, X, hopefully Blue Sky soon. And so we put all of our content out on all of those formats as well.
Blue Sky is a new one to me. I haven't dabbled in that yet.
We are only just dabbling. We are not really doing much there yet. So,
well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I have certainly learned a lot, and I know our listeners will too.
Thank you so much.
If you have valued these stories or learned something from what you've heard, please share this podcast episode or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support, and together we can build a better community and world.